Welcome to NEXTGames, a guide to ninja series. In this episode, we will cover ninjutsu and skills. Before we get into that, it's my goal to always make sure these videos are as accurate as possible. That being said, there are times that I may miss something or be incorrect. If you feel I'm mistaken on something, please feel free to point it out, and if a mistake was made, I will either pin it to the comments section so that everyone can get the right information, or address the mistake in a future video. In my first two episodes, there were 3 things I didn't get quite right or left out information on, and I would like to clarify those items right now. In my first video, I mentioned that you can use Elemental Ninjutsu Wheel to continually deal damage to an enemy, and if you keep your shadows up and don't melee, you can make it so that the enemy never gets any TP. This information was based on my testing where whatever I was killing would usually die within 20 sand spells or so. One of my subscribers mentioned that these spells are in fact feeding a mob TP. After some testing on higher level Apex mobs, I can confirm that a mob will get enough TP to use an ability on you after 25 or so sand spells. The use of Urine seems to have a large effect on this TP gain, as if Urine is on the mob, you can usually go as high as 40 sand spells before an ability will be used. This means that there is still a very worthwhile way to take down an enemy that has nasty abilities, but keep in mind that it will not stop them entirely from using those abilities, and that you will still need to deal with an ability being used on you every few minutes. In my last video, I mentioned that the maximum Daken trait was 74%, and I had completely forgotten to include the augments on the Ninja Nodowa Nex. At max augment level, the Ninja Nodowa will add 15% to that Daken activation rate, Ninja Nodowa plus 1 will add 20% to the Daken activation, and Ninja Nodowa plus 2 will add 25% to the Daken activation rate, for a total of 99% possible Daken activation rate. Now, I also mentioned in the last video that the maximum subtle blow rate was 50, and that Ninja sadly didn't have access to any of the gear with the subtle blow 2 trait on it. That was incorrect. The Fudo Masamune Path B at maximum augment level offers Subtle Blow 2 plus 25. This will bring your Subtle Blow trait to the maximum of 75. I'm excited to do some testing with this new Subtle Blow level and see how well it works. I should finish hitting rank 25 on Path A, B, and C on my Fudos in March, and look forward to comparing them to my other Rimas. Lastly, I just wanted to clarify 2 things about the damage limit plus gear. The gear and trait are not the same and are multiplicative, so the total increase from the gear and the trait is actually 34%, not 33%. Additionally, you will need enough attack versus the target's defense to actually take advantage of this increased cap. What that pretty much means is if you're already not doing that much damage to a mob, i.e. it's very high level, this probably isn't going to help you much. Otherwise, if you're already doing a lot of damage to the mob, this will probably allow you to do a bit more damage. Okay, so now enough of that. Let's get on to the ninjutsu. At level 9, Ninja gets access to its first ninjutsu spell, Tonko Ichi. This first spell simply grants you invisible that lasts for 3 minutes, which means any mob that detects based on sight will not detect you for the 3 minutes that you have this spell up. At level 34, Ninjutsu gets access to the upgraded version of this spell, Tonko Ni. This version will keep you invisible for 5 minutes. Lastly, at level 25, Ninja will get access to Monomi Ichi. This spell will grant you Sneak that will last for 3 minutes. This means any mobs that detect based on sound will not detect you for 3 minutes. Sadly, there is no Monomi Ni, so therefore you will always actually have your Sneak lasting 2 minutes less than your Invisible if you're using Ni as opposed to Ichi for your Tonko. The next ninjutsu that Ninja gets access to is at level 12, and it's Ninja's most important spell, Utsusumi. Now, Utsusumi gives you a certain number of shadows that will block almost all incoming spells, abilities, and attacks. The main exceptions to this rule are multi-hit weapon skills, which will normally take the amount of shadows equal to the number of hits in that weapon skill. Also, AoE spells and abilities will also wipe your shadows entirely. Utsumi Ichi, granted at level 12, will give you 3 shadows. It will take 4 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast. Utsumi Ni, granted at level 37, will give you 4 shadows. It takes 1.5 seconds to cast and has a 45-second recast. Utsusumi San, granted when reaching job point of 100, will give you 5 shadows. It takes just a half a second to cast, but has a 60-second recast. Now the amount of enmity gained will depend on whether or not Yonin is up. Shadows will give you only 160 volatile enmity and 0 cumulative enmity when you don't have Yonin up. However, once you put Yonin up, you will get 480 volatile enmity and 160 cumulative enmity each time you cast Shadows. Now additionally, Iga Kahan plus 1, Hattori Kahan, and Hattori Kahan plus 1 will all give you an additional shadow if worn when casting Utsesmi. And Daria's Mantle from Ambuscade will also give you an additional shadow if worn when casting Utsesmi. I recommend you get the above gear right away, as both of these can be obtained with a very lightly geared level 99 ninja. The last thing I want to mention is using Ichi will not overwrite your Ni or Sand shadows, and casting Ni will not overwrite your Sand shadows, so make sure you cancel them if they are still up at the time of casting. If you don't know how to do this, in 2 weeks or so I'll be releasing the macro video which will go into this in detail. The next ninjutsu that ninja receives are the elemental ninjutsus at level 15. The elemental ninjutsus all do damage of one element while weakening the mob to another element. When used in a rotation, this can be used to continually weaken the mob to the element that you will be using in your next spell. It can also be used to lower the mob's resistance to certain elements, so that enfeebles based on that element can land more easily. Kaiten will do fire damage and lower its resistance to water. Suden will do water damage and lower resistance to thunder. Raiden will do thunder damage and then lower the resistance to earth. Doden will do earth damage and then lower the resistance to wind. Huden will do wind damage and then lower the resistance to ice. And then Hyuten will do ice damage and then lower the resistance to fire, and then you just start back at the Kaiten again, and you just continually do that in a rotation. Now Ninja gets access to the Ichi version of these spells at level 15. They can take 4 seconds to cast, and has a 30-second recast. Ninja gets access to the Ni version of these spells at level 40. They can take 1.5 seconds to cast and have a 45-second recast. Ninja then lastly gets access to the Stand version of these spells at level 75. They can take 2.5 seconds to cast and have a 60-second recast. The Sand versions of ninjutsu do the most damage, followed by Ni and then Ichi, but I will say the Ni damage is not too far behind Sand. For instance, usually if you're doing about 10k with Sand, Ni is going to do about 9k. If you're doing about 20,000 damage with your Sands, Ni is usually going to be about the 17,000 range. Now once you start getting really up there, and using Fute and some other things, and you start MBing with Sands for somewhere in the 50k range, Ni is really only usually going to tap out at around 35 to 38. So that's where you're going to see a big disparagement there. But really at the lower numbers, there isn't too much of a difference between them. I usually like to MB with starting with Sand, and then following it up with the Ni for a dual magic burst. The next ninjutsu that Ninja receives is Kuriyami Ichi at level 19. Now Kuriyami Ichi reduces the target's accuracy by 20. It takes 4 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast. Kuriyami Ni is acquired at level 44 and reduces the target's accuracy by 30. It takes 1.5 seconds to cast and has a 45-second recast. Kuriyami Ni overwrites both Kuriyami Ichi and Blind, so keep that in mind. The next ninjutsu we're going to talk about, Ninja receives at level 23, and it is Hojo Ichi. Hojo Ichi slows the target by 15%. It takes 4 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast. Hojo Ni is achieved at level 48 and slows the target by 20%. It takes 1.5 seconds to cast and has a 45-second recast. Now Raiden can be used to lower the enemy's resistance to earth, which will allow you to more easily land Hojo. The next ninjutsu that Ninja receives is Dokomuri Ichi at level 27. Dokomuro Ichi inflicts 3 damage per tick poison. It takes 4 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast. Kaiten can be used to weaken the enemy's resistance to water and help you land Dokomuri. The next ninjutsu that Ninja receives is Jubaku Ichi at level 30. Jubaku Ichi inflicts a paralyze that has a 20% proc rate. It takes 4 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast. Huten can be used to weaken the enemy's resistance to ice and help land Jubaku. The next ninjutsu that ninja receives is Aisha Ichi at level 78. Aisha Ichi decreases the enemy's attack by 15%. It takes 4 seconds to cast, and it has a 30-second recast. Kaiten can be used to weaken the enemy's resistance to water and help you land Aisha. The next ninjutsu that ninja receives is Urine Ichi at level 83. Now Urine Ichi inhibits a monster's TP gain by 10%. It takes 4 seconds to cast, and has a 30-second recast timer. This is ninja's most useful and feeble in my opinion, and I recommend you cast this as frequently as possible, especially when in places like Dynamis. The next ninjutsu that ninja receives is MIOSHA Ichi at level 85. Now MIOSHA Ichi grants you a subtle blow effect of 10, bringing your total to 42 without any gear. It takes 4 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast, and it lasts 5 minutes. Now, normally this would be very useful to ninja as you want a lot of subtle blow, but since you're already normally so close to the cap and your gear is going to end up capping it for you, this is not that frequently used. But if you do happen to have a gear setup that is not capping your subtle blow, you definitely want to use this to make sure it's capped at all times. The next ninjutsu that ninja receives is Megawari Ichi at level 88. Now Megawari Ichi makes you immune to severely damaging attacks. When up, it will reduce any damage that does over roughly 60% of your hit points to 0. This number starts at around 73% at level 99 and then gets further reduced by job gifts and the ambuscade cape. This is one of the best ways ninja has of living through large amounts of spike damage, especially things like AoE magic. It takes 3 seconds to cast and has a 2-minute recast, and it lasts exactly 1 minute. So this means you always want to make sure that you cast this with your best fast cast setup to ensure that the recast on it ends up dropping below that 1 minute that it'll last you. Otherwise, you'll have periods of time where you don't have Megawari up. You can lower this threshold an additional 12% to below 50 if you use a Hattori Nigi +1. However, I don't recommend you do this as that may cause it to activate too often and therefore not be there when you really need it when something that really is damaging hits you. The next ninjutsu that ninja receives is Gekko Ichi at level 88. Gekko Ichi gives you an enmity boost of 30 and is a very useful way of boosting your hate. It takes 3 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast. Gekko Ichi lasts for 5 minutes. Now if you want to reduce your hate, the next ninjutsu ability will help you. It's called Yain Ichi and you get it at level 91. Now Yain Ichi gives you an enemy reduction of 15. It takes 3 seconds to cast, has a 30-second recast, and it will also last for 5 minutes. Now the last ninjutsu that ninja gets access to is Caca Ichi at level 93. It will give you a stored TP boost of 10 and is helpful in increasing your overall TP gain. It takes 3 seconds to cast and has a 30-second recast and will last 5 minutes once it's cast. Now let's take a look at the skills that ninja has access to. First, let's take a look at the combat skills. Katana is the most obvious one as it's ninja's primary weapon. It maxes out at a skill level of 424 at level 99. Also maxing out at a skill level of 424 is your throwing. This will ensure that all of those shuriken you are throwing almost every round actually land and hit your opponent and give you your TP return. Now the rest of these combat skills aren't normally going to be that useful for ninja, but let me go ahead and explain to you when it is these will come into play. First off, your dagger skill at a maximum of 378 at level 99 will be very useful any time that you need to proc something that requires piercing damage. Additionally, evisceration can do fairly good damage with ninja if you have a critical hit setup. The next combat skill we'll talk about is club. This is the one that you're going to want to use any time that you need to be using blunt damage. Now it's going to cap at a skill of 300 at level 99, therefore you're going to have to use more accuracy in your gear setup than you would have when you're using your katana and your dagger. Now when you're using the club, the weapon skill that you want to make sure that you use is True Strike as it will give you the most damage. Now the next 3 combat skills we'll talk about are Sword, which caps at a skill level of 373, Great Katana, which caps at a skill level of 368, and Hand to Hand, which caps at a skill level of 300. You frankly really aren't going to use these that frequently unless you're trying to proc a very specific weapon skill or proc red in Abysia. The last 2 we're going to speak of in regards to combat skills are Marksmanship and Archery. Now these had uses in the past on ninja, but since the advent of Daken and the use of Shuriken, there really isn't any instance when I can think of when you're really going to want to be using archery or marksmanship skills in the future. Next, we will talk about Ninja's defensive skills. Ninja has evasion, which caps at a skill level of 417 at level 99. Now you want to add as much evasion skill, especially to your evasion gear setup, as possible, because evasion skill is what's going to allow you the most possibility to evade an attack. Not just evasion, but evasion skill. Now the parrying skill for Ninja is going to cap at a skill level of 417. Now sadly, even at that skill level, parrying procs far too infrequently for my taste, but it is what it is. Now let's talk about magic skills. The only magic skills that Ninja gets innate access to is Ninjutsu, which caps at a skill level of 417 at level 99, and by the time you've reached a Master Ninja level because of job gifts, it's reached a level of 453 skill points. Now this is a very important statistic for both landing all of your enfeebles, as well as when it comes to your actual ninjutsu damage and getting not resisted in regards to that as well. So you really want to make sure your skill is as high as possible when it comes to your magic accuracy and magic attack gear sets. That is going to be it for ninjutsu and skills. Please join me next time when I'll be covering ninjutsu merits, job points, and job gifts. The video following that will be my macro video that I know many have been waiting for. That video will show how all of my macros work for Ninja, and I will provide examples of how to use both Final Fantasy XI's native macro system, as well as include information on how and why to use the gear swap system. My custom-made LUAs for Ninja will also be included to help give people a head start. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.